I've always been someone who preferred the night. Ever since I was a child, I felt a kind of comfort in the silence of the late hours. But that changed after what happened at that convenience store. I had just moved to a small town in Tennessee, looking for a fresh start after making some bad decisions in life. I got a job at a 24-hour convenience store, a monotonous job, but it paid the bills. The night shift seemed perfect for me, until that night. It all started around 3 in the morning. The store was empty as usual. I was stocking shelves when I heard the door chime. I looked up and saw a man walk in. At first glance, he seemed normal. He wore a worn-out brown jacket, jeans and work boots. His face was partially hidden under a cap, and the dim store lighting only made everything seem stranger. He walked slowly, as if unsure of what he wanted. He picked up a few items, stared at them for a while, then put them back. But the thing that unsettled me the most was how he always seemed to stay within my line of sight, like he wanted me to be aware of his presence. I watched him through the security mirror, trying not to make direct eye contact. After a few minutes, he walked up to the counter. He placed 3 items on the register: a pack of cookies, a bottle of water, and a lighter. I scanned the items and told him the total. He didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at me. The silence was uncomfortable, the kind of silence that makes the hairs on your neck stand up for no apparent reason. Finally, he reached out and handed me a $20 bill. I took the money and started counting his change. When I looked up to hand it to him, he was gone. Vanished in the blink of an eye. No sound, no movement, just gone. I looked around expecting to see him walking out the door, but there was no one. The store was completely empty. My eyes moved to the items on the counter. He hadn't even taken them. The money was still there. Something inside me told me to get out of there, but I needed to understand what had happened. That's when I decided to check the security cameras. On the monitor screen, I saw him enter the store. I saw him walk through the aisles. But when he reached the counter, he simply disappeared. He didn't leave through the door. He didn't walk back into the aisles. He just ceased to exist. I replayed the footage over and over, but the result was the same. My heart started pounding. This didn't make any sense. I saw that man. I touched his money. So why was there no record of him leaving? My shift ended shortly after that, and when I got home, I tried to convince myself that I was just tired and that my brain had played a trick on me. But then the next night came. I went back to work, still disturbed by what had happened. The store felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that settles in your bones. The night dragged on slowly, but just before 3, a shiver ran down my spine. The automatic door opened by itself. I looked toward the entrance, expecting to see someone, but there was no one there. The temperature suddenly dropped. The register radio let out a strange static noise. The light in the beverage section flickered a few times, and then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the aisle next to me. I slowly turned my head. There he was, the man in the brown jacket, standing between the shelves, staring at me. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to say something, but my voice wouldn't come out. The light flickered again, and when it stabilized, he was gone. I looked at the security monitor. The screen was grainy, filled with interference, but in the middle of that digital noise, I could see something. His figure, pale, hollow, dark eyes, his mouth whispering something I couldn't understand. And then the register radio crackled again. This time I heard it clearly. "Can you see me now?" My heart pounded. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran to the back room, locked the door, and called my manager to come in. My manager arrived about 20 minutes later. When I stepped out of the back room, the store was silent, motionless. There was no sign of the man, no footprints, no sound. But then, something caught my attention. On the counter, exactly where he had left his change the night before, there was another $20 bill. identical, with the same crease in the corner, as if it had never been touched. The next day, I quit. I never went back there. Out of curiosity, a few months later, I looked up that store's history. I found out that about 15 years ago, a man in a brown jacket was killed during a robbery there. He had been trying to buy some snacks when an armed thief entered and shot him before running away. The last recorded image of him was in the exact spot where I first saw him. To this day, I wonder, if he never left that night, then where is he now? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel for more content like this and share it with your friends. Many more chilling stories are yet to come. My name is Michael Carter, and for almost 10 years, I worked as a night watchman in a commercial building in Indianapolis, Indiana. It was an easy job. Most nights were boring. My routine always started the same way. A quick round through the empty hallways, checking if all the doors were locked, and then spending the night monitoring the security cameras. The company hired security just as a formality, since nothing truly concerning had ever happened there. But a few weeks ago, something started making me uneasy. The first time I saw that man, I didn't think much of it. He was standing in the parking lot, motionless, staring at the building. He wore a dark coat and worn-out jeans, his face hidden by the shadow of his hood. He could have been a homeless person or someone waiting for a ride, but the longer I looked at him, the more I felt that something was wrong. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring directly at the camera. I watched for a while, expecting him to leave, but after about 20 minutes, I lost interest and continued my rounds. When I came back, he was already gone. The next night, when I started my shift, my curiosity made me check the parking lot cameras. My stomach churned. The man was there again, in the same spot, in the same position, staring at the camera. By this point, my gut was telling me something wasn't right. I grabbed my flashlight and went down to the building's entrance. The parking lot was completely empty. No sign of the man. I went back upstairs and rewound the footage, and that's when my uneasiness grew. He hadn't arrived. He hadn't left. He had just appeared. I took a deep breath. Maybe it was a system glitch, some kind of transmission failure. I tried to convince myself of that, but I knew something was wrong. On the third night, something changed. This time, I knew he would be there before I even looked at the cameras. My heart was already pounding before the image loaded, and when it did, there he was, only this time, closer. The man had moved a few meters toward the building. He was still standing still, but now, besides staring at the camera, his head was slightly tilted, as if he was observing me. My skin prickled. I decided to test something. I grabbed my radio and called a security colleague who worked in the neighboring building. I asked him to check the parking lot. He replied a few minutes later, "There's no one here, man. The parking lot is empty." I swallowed hard. How was that possible? He was right there on the screen, but outside, he didn't exist. In the following days, everything got worse. Every night the man appeared closer to the building, and more I felt that he wasn't an ordinary person. I started getting paranoid. I began checking the cameras every 5 minutes. On the 5th night, when I looked at the screen, he was at the entrance door. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I grabbed my flashlight and ran downstairs. My hands trembled as I opened the door. There was no one there, but the air felt strange, heavy, like someone had just been there. I went back upstairs. My body was shaking with anxiety. I reviewed the footage, and that's when I saw it. The exact moment I opened the door, the man turned his head to look directly at me. My obsession with this started affecting my work. I talked to my boss, but he just laughed, saying it must be some technical error. So, I decided to investigate on my own. I accessed the company's database and looked for old records of the building. I discovered that years ago, before the company bought the place, It used to be a hotel, but something terrible had happened there. In 1987, a guest was found dead in room 308. He had hanged himself. The hotel cameras showed that for 3 nights before his death, he had stood in the parking lot staring at the building. My blood ran cold. The face in the newspaper photo was identical to the man on the camera. The next night, I already knew what would happen. And yet, when I looked at the cameras, my heart nearly stopped. The man was inside the building. He was on the ground floor, standing in the main hallway, staring directly at the camera. He had sunken eyes, pale skin, and a smile that seemed to distort the very video feed. That's when the lights flickered, and the image cut out. A shiver ran through me. Everything went dark. The generator took a few seconds to reboot. When the monitors came back on, he was gone. I left the building that night and never went back. I quit the next day. That happened 5 years ago. To this day I avoid passing by that building. But every now and then, out of morbid curiosity, I check online forums, reading reports from those who work there now. Last week I found a post from a new night guard. He described something strange, a man standing in the parking lot looking at the cameras. And now, as I finish saying this, I wonder, if I check the security cameras of my own building, will he be there too?
My name is Emily Carter, and for almost 4 years, I worked as a night clerk at an old hotel called Riverside Inn in Savannah, Georgia. It wasn't one of those luxury hotels, but it also wasn't a roadside motel. It was the kind of place with thick, musty-smelling carpets, dark wooden furniture, and a large but always empty lobby. I loved working the night shift. Fewer guests, fewer problems. I would stay behind the counter, organizing reservations, drinking coffee, and listening to true crime podcasts to stay awake. Some nights were busy, others dragged on. But there was something strange about that hotel, something I tried to avoid thinking about. The older employees talked about strange noises, footsteps in empty hallways, and voices in unoccupied rooms. But I never paid attention to those stories until that night. The night I answered a call that shouldn't have existed. It was around 2:37 a.m. The hotel was silent with only 2 confirmed guests that night. I was almost dozing off at the counter when the intercom rang. The sound echoed through the empty lobby, making me shiver. I picked up the phone and responded automatically. "Reception, Emily speaking. How can I help you?" For a moment, I only heard static. Then, a weak, muffled male voice came from the other end. "Good evening. Could you bring some extra towels to room 308? I looked at the system. My forehead immediately furrowed. Room 308 wasn't occupied. Even worse, no one was supposed to be in that room. My stomach twisted. I thought about asking again, but the line went dead. No noise, no breathing, nothing. I wanted to believe it was a system error. Some interference, a problem with the intercom line. But I knew it wasn't. I heard that voice. Someone had called me. I took a deep breath and tried to act logically. I picked up the phone and called the hotel's security guard, Danny, a man in his 50s who always said the place was haunted. "Danny, someone just called from room 308 asking for towels." The silence on the other end lasted long seconds before he responded, "That's not possible." "I know. Emily, that room has been locked for years." My throat went dry. I had heard rumors about 308, but I never paid attention. They said that, long ago, something happened there. Some said a guest never checked out, others that an employee disappeared, but no one spoke directly about it. Danny suggested ignoring it, but I couldn't. I grabbed a pair of towels as if that request were real and went upstairs. Each step felt heavier. The third-floor hallway was completely silent. Only the faint hum of fluorescent lights broke the void. Room 308 was at the end of the corridor. The closer I got, the more my skin prickled. The air there was different, dense, cold. It felt like time was moving slower. Finally, I stopped in front of the door. It was identical to the others, except for one detail. The number 308 was slightly crooked, as if someone had tried to pull it off. My heart pounded as I raised my hand and knocked on the door. I waited. The silence was crushing. I knocked again, and then, from inside, 3 soft knocks echoed back. My fingers clenched around the towels. My breathing was short. "Sir?" I brought the towels. No response, just an oppressive silence. Suddenly, the door latch made a metallic sound, as if someone was turning the doorknob from the inside. I took a step back. Then the voice came again, whispered, distorted. "You shouldn't be here." My body froze. The voice came from the other side of the door, but it was wrong, as if it were coming from an old radio, a mix of static and whispers. That was enough for me to run down the corridor, rushing down the stairs without looking back. I returned to the reception, out of breath, tossing the towels onto the counter. Danny looked at me with a somber expression. "I told you not to go up there. Someone was inside." He sighed. He picked up a ring of old keys and pulled out one in particular, slightly rusted. "If you want to know the truth, come with me." We went up together. Danny unlocked the door to 308 and slowly pushed it open. The room was completely empty, but the smell, the musty, rotten smell, was still there. On the dusty desk, there was a single object, an old hotel registry book. Danny opened it, flipping through quickly until he stopped on a specific page. He pointed to an entry dated 1989. He never checked out. I looked at the last note on the file, a single sentence written in haste. "Do not knock on the door." After that night, I quit my job. I never went back to the Riverside Inn. But recently, while cleaning out my old email, I found a message from a former colleague at the hotel. He said they had installed new security cameras on the 3rd floor. On the first night of recording, around 2:30 a.m., the intercom rang at the reception. The employee answered, and a weak, static-filled voice asked, "Extra towels for room 308. The employee refused to go up, but when they checked the cameras. The door to 308 was open, and inside, in the dark corner of the room, someone was standing, staring directly at the camera.